So we want to welcome everybody who is listening to our webinar, not only our partnership with Cleveland Independent School District here at the University of Texas at Austin, but the fellowship using the science of engagement, but also just want to thank them for all the work that they've done. I know it's been a long year, but certainly I think that today's conversation will give them some more insights about perhaps how we can address issues of challenges regarding math engagement, especially at the secondary school level, and really look at a case study here with Cleveland ISD. You know, among all the challenges school districts are dealing with right now, why don't we give at least one insight that they can actually do something about? And I think that's where we're here. But so we want to welcome everybody. So thanks for joining us today. And thanks for joining David Yeager. My name is Andrew Kim. Was a former superintendent of the Cleveland Independent School District and Maynard Independent School District for quite a bit of a while. And David and I have known each other now, gosh, almost 20 years now, David, I think. You know, our mutual friend, Angela Duckworth from the University of Pennsylvania, introduced us. And I've been a fan of course, that work and David's work for some time. And, you know, David's work, Stephen, was always my secret sauce behind the scenes in terms of how we work with our students at the middle school level, high school level. But I tell you what, we can share some stories on that. And but we also had Dr. Stephen McCandless, a good friend, a great guy, doing a great job in one of the toughest school districts that I know, in Cleveland Independent School District, a fast growth school district. And so I really appreciate both of you guys joining in today.
Thank you, sir. And even though you call me doctor, I am in the last dissertation 4. I'm in the last part of it. So once that's done and official, I'll let you call me doctor. But I appreciate that because, you know, the experiences and challenges we're going through here, sometimes I feel like I'm doctor plus 10 times. But thank you for that introduction.
Well, you know, you deserve that. So, Stephen, let's kind of get right back into it because I know the folks who are on, their time is very precious. You know, when you think about the challenges that you have, you know, obviously you're dealing with fast growth, you're dealing with the diversity of student body that you have here in Cleveland Independent School District, and you have math challenges. So how are you managing all of that?
You know, in today's education world, with all the challenges you mentioned and the way students learn today, a district has to look at finding the quality staff, especially in your math and sciences, math inclusive, of how to bring that learning down to the student level and engage them and excite them about math. Because if you can't find that connection in the very beginning, then we have found that you have an entire semester or an entire school year of struggles and students not being as successful in the math courses. So in Cleveland ISD, we have found unique ways, engaging ways, synergistic type ways to get the students involved in math.
You know, beyond just like the activities to get kids involved, are you finding teachers are, especially the new teachers that are coming on board with you, how prepared do you think they are overall, in a general sense, compared to perhaps when I came up to the ranks as a teacher?
Teachers can come out of their teacher program out of college and university and have all the knowledge base they want about math, but it's connecting with the students. It's that classroom component and understanding how to get that information across to the students. There's a certain behavior involved in that, and building relationships is key. You know, I look back on everybody on this Microsoft Teams today can say, well, we've known about building relationships for 20 or 30 years. That is just key. That is very true. I'm not telling you anything new, but it's the way you build relationships, because in the past, relationships were what I call transactional. We're going to do this on the teacher part. You're going to do that on the student part, and we're going to move forward with the lesson. What we've had to learn to do is to make sure relationships are transformational and that the teacher-student engagement has taken it to the next level. So in our math classrooms, you have students who become more of the actual educator. Teachers are acting as facilitators because we all know the things you see in here you retain, but the things you do, you're going to retain at a higher level. So we had to think out of the box as a district and look at the way students learn today. And our teachers have been very excited about themselves thinking out of the box. It has helped them realize more about who they are and in terms of an educator and what they can bring to the table. And I don't want to get too much on that. I'm sure there's further down a conversation where I can talk about it. But you know, teachers are not coming out into any school district knowing how to go right to work and working with students. We have to help them be successful at that.
Yeah, Stephen, I think, it's been said multiple times that we can probably acquire things related to like base 10 tables, TI navigated calculators, curriculum even, and so forth. But it's really hard to purchase attitude, belief systems, behaviors. And I think that's a difficult thing. So, am I understanding that you think that relationships with kids have changed over the years now? Do you feel that?
They have, you know, back when we were in school, or even when I was teaching, I've been in leadership now for 20 years. So, 20 years ago, you would do your let's get to know each other on the first day of school. What'd you do over summer? Do you have a dog? Do you have a cat? You know, all those basic questions. That was the old transactional relationship building. But in today's world, with students needing to be more stimulated, you know, technology, the engagement, AI is coming into play. We knew that we needed to take that transactional relationship building to the transformational and truly making students feel like they are a part of the entire class organization. And that's what
Yeah.
our teachers are doing.
Well, and like you said, we certainly will talk more about the fellowship using the science of engagement.
Mhm.
And you're one of our first adopters. And you decided to jump on board. And it took some conversation for you and I to, and also your teachers to have that. Um, and I think, we want Dr. Yeager to obviously talk about his expertise and why it's so important. But initially, what have you found to be extremely important for you and your teachers?
Uh, Beginning to look at and realize how students learn, there is a behavior to it, and not everyone learns math the same way. I am a perfect example, and I could spend an hour talking about my high school math years of learning. And when I first was introduced to the Fuse and the entire UT partnership, I am not one of those superintendents who goes out or goes to the exhibit hall and sees something and says, "Oh, I got to buy it and bring it back." I rarely do that. I did that back in '07 as a principal, and I have not recommended anything else until we looked at Fuse and most recently another AI program. I
Mm,
just don't do it. I have to make sure that it has meaning to it, that I see that it is going to engage students and teachers. So when I looked at the premise of this, I delved further into it, had more meetings. We selected 12 teachers from our district who we knew would be the ones who would come back and be the cheerleaders for it and help other teachers. It has been extremely successful, and we are very happy with the results we're seeing.
yeah.
It is a mindset of teaching.
Well, and that's the thing. I think what we're proud of is approaching in a new way. I think that we are not trying to disrupt the curricular world. We
No.
certainly are not trying to disrupt the Texas Instruments world, if you will. I hate to do that as an advertising, but we think that there is a behavior approach, not among what the students ought to take care of, but also what the teachers take care of, and how do we make that work? And this is where, David and I talked numerous times, and even at evenings and weekends. And David is and he won't say this, but he is a expert in United States when it comes to adolescent behavior, adolescent mindset. He's an adolescent developmental psychologist, and I really appreciate his approach. He's worked with students throughout the United States, and I think there's a lot of nuances, understanding. So, what's been really kind of cool is that a lot of the things that we've infused into the science of engagement comes from the kids.
Yeah.
Kids are saying we need it this way. Not necessarily experts, but I think that's the unique part of it. So, David, what's your thoughts and our sort of our conversation so far?
Mute it.
Yeah, so what I'd like to do is just kind of provide a developmental perspective and give everyone on the call three things, really. So hopefully you can see my screen here. And those three things are, I'd like to give a new science-based perspective on the math issues facing districts right now, especially for adolescents. A practical takeaway where every single person on this call can have something new to do tomorrow, whether it's with an employee or a student or a spouse. So something useful, and then also our new paradigm, because in many ways, whatever education research has been providing is not yet working because these problems keep happening again and again and again, right? COVID has exacerbated them, right? But the issues have been there all along. And that's what we've heard from most superintendents. So I think the main reason why we wanted to call this symposium was to say, there's actually a new way that's emerging, and we want to make sure Texas gets these ideas first. So what's the new perspective? Well, and I only have like a handful of slides here. This isn't a long talk. I talked recently out in Sci-Fair for their annual meeting, and I asked the room of teachers and administrators, what does disengagement look like in your classroom, especially math classrooms? I heard things like heads down, which makes a lot of sense. Kids just not paying attention. I heard checking phones. This is in the news now with John Haidt's new book about whether people should even have phones, in the classroom. Bathroom breaks. This was kind of hilarious to me, right? Kids pretending to need to go to the bathroom because they don't want to factor trinomials. That's pretty clever, those 13-year-olds. Getting the teacher off topic. I like that one, right? Like knowing that your teacher has some weird idiosyncratic interest in like wrestling or birds or something, and then asking the teacher to talk about it so that no one has to do any work that class period. Again, pretty clever approach. But in general, the way you could summarize these is students wanting to avoid the intellectual challenge of pushing themselves mentally in a classroom and ignoring their mistakes and failing to learn from them. And this turns into a big problem at the end of the course with the EOC exams, right? And what I hear again and again from teachers and instructional coaches is, we taught the kids this math fact or this procedure, they did worksheet after worksheet on it, and then they got to the EOC and they got the problems wrong. And either went one ear out the other, or for some reason it didn't transfer from the way it was taught in direct instruction to exam items that had different surface features later on in the term. And I think this is important because, engagement is a problem for teachers if it turns into misbehavior in the classroom. I was a middle school teacher and I was just terrified of losing the room all the time, right? But it's also a problem for our test scores. And it's a problem because students don't profit as much from our instruction. And we spend all this time buying curricula, buying apps, paying for tutors, having this or that system. And at the end of the day, the kid's making the same number line problem mistake at the beginning of the semester as at the end of the semester. So if we don't fix this, then a lot of the other investments we've already made in our schools are not going to pay off as much as we'd hope. So what happened? Where did this disengagement come from? Is it COVID? You know, like, yeah, I mean, a lot of students realize they didn't have to go to school, and now attendance is really bad because we can't, put the genie back in the bottle with attendance. Is it social media? Well, a lot of people trying to sell books want to convince you that social media is the culprit here. But I would say that disengagement has been a problem for all of human history. You can see Aristotle complaining about the unruly teenagers not listening to grown-ups, right? So let me save you the effort of reading through hundreds of thousands of scientific articles about the teenage brain and hormones and social structure, and give you 100 years of developmental science in 4 bullet points. First point is that we all know, puberty brings hormones, et cetera. And gonadotrophy starts around 10 on average. It could be as early as 7 for girls, especially girls experiencing poverty. So what we all laugh about teenagers becoming crazy aliens when puberty strikes, but what is actually happening in the brain? First point is that teenagers' brains and hormones make them hypersensitive about status. And it's actually preteen as well. So really we're talking 4th, 5th grade up through the end of high school. And they start being very concerned about how they look to others and how they feel about themselves in light of standards for performance or behavior, right? Now, as adults, we see this manifested in lots of ways. Teenagers get obsessed with trends. Their matters to them how they dress in a new way that didn't matter when they were 2nd graders, right? Like my 2nd grader this morning put on a fully backwards shirt and just the weirdest short shorts and then enormous boots, and did not look in the mirror, and then walk to school with total confidence, right? My 8th grader spent an hour and a half figuring out what she's going to wear to school, right? So that's status and respect concerns. But what we forget is that it's not just some funny way that influences how they act in the hallway. It's also going to influence how they respond to failure or even the threat of failure in the classroom. And think about the typical math class. It is full of public failures. And it kind of should be in a great classroom, because we do not want students to hide their mistakes in their own minds. We want to surface them as teachers so we can understand how to troubleshoot, right? We want students to collaborate on their work, because that's what literally every engineer or physicist or anyone who uses math or science in their everyday careers, they're constantly talking about, I'm stuck here, I'm stuck there, I need to fix that. If we want to prepare young people for the STEM workforce, they need to be okay with mistakes and failure. And it seems like their entire neurobiological anatomy is working against that very feature of what we need them to do. Again, on this second point, so I just finished for TEA writing the instructor guide for their new Eureka math. So there's a new open education resource math set of learning materials that will be free across the state. So doing this for Marath and his team. And what they want students to do is to talk about their mistakes in front of the rest of the class. That's great, but convince a 12-year-old surging with testosterone and estradiol and cortisol that that's a great thing to do, right? So that second point makes it really frustrating. It causes this disengagement because students are afraid of failure. But that's not all bad, because the concern with status and respect and your social standing is also their superpower. It is fuel to help young people figure out how to be successful in our culture, right? All of that being attuned to status isn't just trivial things like what's going to get you Instagram likes. It's also, what does my community need to survive? And how am I preparing myself to make that contribution? I don't know how often you guys do this, but if you ever ask a group of 6th graders about problems in your community and what should be changed, they can go on and on and on. And they probably see a lot of things that adults just accept as inevitable, right?
It's
And
true.
it could be everything from
Yes.
transportation to some injustice to why are we treating the immigrants this way to, how come no one's, helping out the, working class, whatever it is. Kids are attuned to that stuff. And that's because they're trying to figure out how they fit into the culture they're going to be a part of. And that's a good thing. And so once you understand that, it's possible to like harness that sensitivity and use it to promote engagement. How can we go from a world where we are afraid of the neurobiology of young people into a world where we say, this is the single greatest untapped power source in our culture, and we're not doing anything with it, and what can we do? So Steve, I see you nodding along. So either you're very polite or you agree with at least something I'm saying, but I'm just curious, what are your reactions to this so far?
I agree completely, and even before I was introduced to Fuse and the philosophy, it is human nature. As you go through school and you are presented with, you have the ability to speak out or raise your hand and ask a question, and as we find out that we're wrong or that was the wrong answer, it just causes us to withdraw even more. Adults can be like that as well. I find teachers can be like that. You don't feel as confident. And I'll share later on what our teachers and some of our students have said about how this has changed their way of teaching and learning. But from my perspective, listening to you, I'm just sitting here nodding because I'm like, I could not agree with Dr. Yeager more than what he is saying, because it is so, so true. You see it in all the classrooms. Students will withdraw from participating if they don't feel like they're a vital part or they are wrong. And when I mentioned the transformational relationship, it is okay if you have the wrong answer. It is okay if you don't understand the math concept, because guess what? You're finding out that 10 other people in this classroom are right there with you. And it's just like adults. When we feel like we're in company of people who have our same struggles, our same stripes, we're like, hey, we can work together. And that's what we've done in our classrooms to let students see you're not alone in this. And then as we watch students, peer mentor and help each other, put smiles on our faces because they're solving their own problem. And they realize I wasn't that wrong after all. I was just doing the wrong step, or I didn't do this before, I should have done that. And it breaking down those barriers of being scared. So Dr. Yeager, I completely embrace what you're saying.
Yeah, and I think what we've learned is that almost everybody thinks, hey, let's break down this old culture of learning. Let's have a new perspective. But how do you actually do that? That's hard when young people have been raised in a culture that doesn't value mistakes. And I think that as a field of education research, we have put so much emphasis on the instructional materials to carry the load, when a huge part of it is how do you create a culture in which young people are ready to embrace the most rigorous instructional materials. One just anecdote is I was working with East Leda School District in El Paso, and the district adopted some new rigorous College Board curriculum that was going to have harder assessments, that basically the teachers couldn't give a review the day before and tell the kids what's going to be on the test, which is what they'd been doing. And so they had in the conventional curriculum, kids were getting like 90% all the time because the teachers gave them the bullets on a review the day before. College Board couldn't do that. And the teachers rebelled. They were like, our kids are not going to deal with getting a 60 or 70. We want them to have a 90. They can't deal with the failure. So they refused the new curriculum. Now, of course, when kids got to the EOC, they were getting 30 or 40% proficient, right? So it just was basically lying to kids early on in the semester. So I think like our expectations about whether young people are ready to embrace the challenge influence whether we as teachers and educators implement certain curriculum. And what we're thinking about a lot, and what the new insight is to try to change that culture. Here's one summary. This is something I wrote for the Holdsworth Foundation years ago, that there's the kind of conventional culture on the right, which is what I've called the culture of compliance. And Jennifer Porter from OnRamps helped name, she came up with that name, culture of compliance. And we want to contrast that with what we're calling a culture of learning, which is a way in which we can kind of harness young people's sensitivity to status and respect, and make it feel like an honor for embracing your difficulty and overcoming challenge. So on the right, so the overall approach in a culture of compliance is something I have called go try harder alone. And I call it that way. I call it that because I talked to so many students who told me, I was like, tell me a story about a teacher that disrespects you. And like, well, it's the teacher where I'm confused on the assignment. I go talk to them after class, and the teacher says, I already explained this to you. In fact, I explained it very clearly. In fact, I explained it very clearly 3 or 4 times. You should have already done all the work. If you would have done the work carefully, you would understand this. So you need to go back, complete all these worksheets, and only then will I talk to you, right? Now, these teachers aren't monsters like that. Like I understand why they're doing this. They're often trying to teach kids accountability and responsibility, right? And it's frustrating for teachers that they already explained it and the kids aren't getting it. But this is a kid who was willing to go talk to the teacher. That's like super important. And the kid's already vulnerable. They got something wrong. They're confused. So they're looking like an idiot in front of their teacher. It's like already very embarrassing to even need to ask for help. People in general do not like to ask for help. Right. It's like people don't use therapy nearly as much as they should. Right. On college campuses, students don't use the writing center or the mental health center. Right. So in general, it's hard for kids to ask for help. And so in a culture of learning, you kind of honor that. And you take what's called a collaborative troubleshooting approach. That's more like, let's look at what you got wrong. Let's see what you got right. Celebrate what you got right. And then try to bridge the stuff you got wrong.
Mm-hmm.
That troubleshooting approach comes from a different implied cause of the student's confusion. In a culture of learning, confusion is just the result of incorrect steps. It's like, there's a part on the car not working, and we're going to fix that part on the car. And we got to figure out which one it is, and then we'll fix it. In a culture of compliance, though, a student's confusion is because they weren't paying attention or they weren't putting in the effort. One kid, Emiliano, at one school district I talked to, told me that he went to his teacher to ask for help and said, I don't understand it. And then the teacher said, tú no lo entiendes porque no quieres, which is you didn't understand it because you didn't want to. And he was like, Dr. Yeager, I have ADHD. I only understand half of what anybody says to me. Like, this was me trying to get the other half, right? So it felt very unjust to him to have the implied cause of confusion be his lack of attention or effort or character. He just wanted someone to work with him. And you can kind of go down the line here where in a culture of learning, what young people need is to know that mistakes are learning opportunities or starting points.
Mm-hmm.
In a culture of compliance, what they're used to is that mistakes are signs of either low ability or inattention or bad parents who don't care, bad culture, whatever it is that we blame kids for. The view of mistake is one in which young people can't admit they have the mistake, because the meaning of the mistake is I'm dumb, I don't care, my parents are bad, my culture's bad, all the things. So who would ever admit to a mistake if that's what it meant, if you made one? And the last is low achievers questions. In a culture of learning, in the bottom left, questions are opportunities to clarify or deepen understanding, right? So the teacher is excited when a student asks a question. They say things like, I'm so glad you asked this because I didn't realize so-and-so thing was confusing. Now that I know it is, I can help the rest of the class understand it. So your courage has helped the entire class to learn. And I want to honor and acknowledge that. Mm-hmm. Teachers take a moment and say that out loud. In a culture of compliance, teachers think, oh, you're asking questions to slow us down and to stop us from making progress. And therefore, your inattention and confusion is harming 20 other children in this classroom, and it's harming my reputation of being a good teacher. And I'm already underpaid and underappreciated, and so you're making everything worse, right? That's like, it sounds insane, but like, I remember being a teacher and thinking things like that. Like, that's where your mind goes when your lesson plan is derailed by a kid's question, right? And the idea is that at the basic level, given that the neuroanatomy of young people are really attuned to status and respect, then that culture of compliance that's so common, makes tons of sense, is just constantly making young people feel disrespected like all the time. Mm-hmm. And so it makes sense that they don't show up saying, yes, I would like to factor more trinomials, please. Like, could we go over inequalities again? How about nonlinear functions, right? That's not what they're saying in a culture of compliance, because we've switched off their kind of neurobiological interest in learning, at least learning in that relationship from that person. Whereas the respectful side can be really powerful. So I want to pause there, and maybe just Stephen and Andy, if like, what stands out to you about this, and also people feel free to put questions in the chat.
So
Yeah.
I want to jump in here. I'm going to get in front of Andrew. He'll get his chance. But I first want to say I have never seen this chart. Okay, this is the first time I've seen it. And as I'm looking at it and reading it and listening to Dr. Yeager, even before the chart was up, I had mentioned about students feeling insecure because they do the incorrect steps to solve a problem. So there it is right there in the culture of learning, culture of compliance. What we found, and it's not just math, it's all subjects, but today we're talking about math, is when a teacher starts the class, we as administrators, I've observed, they'll start out by saying, okay, I have 50 minutes. We have 50 minutes today, and I've got to get these topics across to you. So we need to stay on task and move forward. Well, you've just set the tone because, deep down, students want to be compliant. They do.
Yeah.
They don't come to school saying, I'm going to disrupt today. They want to be compliant. There are things that get them off task during the day, but inherently students want to comply. And when the teacher has set the tone for, I have 50 minutes, I have 3 topics, and we need to move along, you have just created a culture of, I'm not going to do anything to mess this up for the teacher. What we found is when the teacher introduces the lesson and says, we have quite a few concepts to get across today. Many of them, most of them are going to be challenging. The teacher can say they are challenging. I know, I was looking at it. I remember back in high school as a student, you're already connecting with the student to let them know there's a challenge coming and you've set the tone for, but we're going to get through it together. And we found that when we do that, you have broken down those barriers. Students are going to move forward with you. They're going to ask questions. Because in the old way, when you say we have 50 minutes and we need to move along and y'all need to stay on task, the students who would ask questions through that process actually slowed down. It would slow down because you're having to reteach and redo the example because you had them so uptight from the beginning, they're really not paying attention. In the way our teachers present the lesson now, that it is going to be challenging, we're going to get through it together. They're more on task, they're paying attention, they're watching, and teachers have found that they're progressing through the lesson so much easier than the old compliant way. And I'm not going to say it's 100% positive in all, because we have been implementing this past year, but teachers have to change their behavior as well. It's not all on the students. The teachers found that by changing our delivery of instruction and our behavior and how we start with the students, it has changed the whole process. So as I was listening to you and looking at this chart, I'm like, this is so true. And especially with the question. So this was good to see this.
Yeah. And I think that Andy, I'm just going to, just in the interest of moving along, just want to share that, the big question is, teachers hear this and they say, now I want to do culture of learning. But then all of a sudden there's a new realization. This feels daunting. If it feels like all of society has been doing culture of compliance and now I have to fight against it, is it going to feel new? And also, does culture of learning feel like too many things? Like, this is only 4 rows, but they're all vague, and how do I do it? What we try to do is to simplify and say, look, aim for the mix of rigor and support. And this isn't just my framework. Turns out researchers in almost every field, parenting, leadership, business, management, teaching, have come up with a version of this 2x2. And we want to be in the high intellectual rigor category, where we're asking you to examine your mistakes, examine your misconceptions, revise them, think like a scientist, whatever it is. but in a supportive community in which all students are asked to do that and all students are supported to do that.
Yep.
And support can take on many dimensions. It could be flexibility on logistics, or it could be a caring teacher. It could be just clarifying, I'm taking you seriously as a person, right? So I think the simple practical takeaway, point 2, is to aim for high rigor, high support. That's going to lead to a culture of learning. It's going to come across as respectful because you're taking young people seriously. They feel respected because they're challenged, they're taken seriously as thinkers, but they're also supported as they try to meet the rigorous standards.
Yeah.
Because if you just have the rigor and not the support, then kids think that your class is like being at Six Flags, being told that you have to be this tall to ride the ride, and you're not this tall, so see you later. You go ride the teacup, right? So the first step of actually helping teachers do this was to simplify it to this kind of framework. The second step is, how do you then train and influence teachers? Well, we could get into pre-service training and certification. That's something we're thinking about. But there are a lot of teachers in schools right now. And frankly, those teachers, on average, we find in surveys, feel anxious, overwhelmed, under attack. It feels like we're putting our entire culture war on a teacher that is already underpaid and underappreciated and under-resourced. And unfortunately, if you look at conventional models of teacher change, so how would you conventionally try to move teachers from culture of compliance to culture of learning? The results are really like not promising. So tons of research by Matt Kraft, coming out of the Research Partnership for Professional Learning, suggests that conventional PD rarely lasts and rarely transfers. The most common result of conventional PD is teachers end up with a binder of things they feel guilty about not doing that sits on a desk or a shelf. Teacher evaluation systems. So having kind of incentive-tied evaluation systems in which you're supposed to give formative feedback when deciding on evaluation scores ends up giving teachers very low-quality feedback, and in a new paper by Matt Kraft has exactly a null effect. So there's been no improvement in teaching from about 20 years worth of improvements, supposed improvements in a teacher evaluation systems. Teacher coaching can be really effective, but it's highly variable. And anyone who played Little League sports knows sometimes you get a great coach, sometimes you get a terrible coach. And often it's the terrible coach that makes you want to never do something again. And last, a lot of you are talking about AI virtual coaching, and we're doing a lot of that with Stanford and so on. But even if you have a great tool, how do you get teachers to sit down and use it in light of all the other things on their plate? Lots of other challenges for culture of learning. What practices are there? How would you measure them? How do you change teachers? Our pass at this is a teacher fellowship model. This is what I'm going to end with. But this is point 3, the new paradigm. Before I get into the details, our basic philosophy is that instead of trying to replace teachers with technology or with 22-year-old tutors that are going to do the job of teachers instead, let's honor and value and elevate the profession and actually give people the tools that they need to meet that higher standard we're going to ask of the teachers. So it's basically treat teachers with the same kind of culture of learning that we want them to be creating in their classrooms. And so what our philosophy led to is a model in which teachers are fellows for 1 to 3 years. They get a letter nominating them from their administrator. Although, ideally we have all teachers do it. We don't want it to just limit to the highest performing teachers. But it still feels like they're known and seen by their admin. They get training institutes of the science and the science of engagement, which they tend to really like. We bring them to Austin. There's an open bar. We give everybody Yetis, t-shirts, like it's a great time. But they also learn a lot. And then they get monthly virtual coaching from really high quality Texas public school teachers. And critically, we give them a stipend because they're fellows. We ask them to be creators, not just receivers of information. And they present in a showcase. So it's almost like teacher culture of learning science fair, where at the end of the year, here's what I tried in my classroom. Here's the evidence. Here's what seemed to work. Now let's share it with other teachers. So I want to kind of end with that and just say we ended up in this place because first, a dissatisfaction with how young people are treated in our culture, in our math classes. To know, not to blame any individuals, it's just how our culture has always done it.
Right.
And we're lucky that we've identified a better way, the culture of learning, but now you have a new challenge, is how to help teachers do that with fidelity.
Yes.
And you cannot script culture. Culture is like, what are the real rules governing action that are different from these stated rules, right?
Yeah, I
And,
really like that
and that's why the
phrase.
teacher fellowship model helps teachers. We have to kind of win hearts and minds, not just give them a checklist. So I'll stop there and Andy, hand it over to you.
Well, I was going to say that I really like that phrase. You cannot script culture. You know, ubiquitously, I think all of us in education systems talk about culture and climate all the time, try to even measure it. Stephen, you know, certainly you have teachers from Cleveland ISD who are early adopters of this.
Yes.
What are they saying to you about it?
Last year, after they came back from the 3-day workshop, the conference, they didn't mention, well, I did this so I can get the stipend, or I did this because of the open bar, or I did this because of the food. They came back, and I still remember the excitement coming out of them when they shared it with their principal at their staff meetings with district leadership. Some of the words were like, wow. Meeting teachers from other districts and learning how, and these were some 20-year veteran teachers. One of them specifically said, I learned how I have been improperly engaging with students. They are teaching us how to get in there, and you've always heard about the hook. How do you get students interested in the lesson? And some of the other things, because the teachers shared with, one of them said it teaches how to delete the negative stigma towards math, how to talk about feelings and not suppress the student feelings. And that goes back to that collaboration. And we're all one team, and we're here to get through the struggles. Another one of the teachers, because I have 12 in it, she said it revolutionized the way she approaches instruction. And I was like, okay, you're saying that, but what do you mean by that? You're the teacher. How did it revolutionize? And she said, because it taught me to change my behavior and the approach to the lesson. It's not, I'm going to stand here and teach and put all this out there and you're going to gain it. And like Dr. Yeager said earlier, if you didn't get it, I taught it, you just didn't understand it, but we got to move on. It taught her that there are students who truly struggle. And as the teacher, she has the power, the knowledge to help them understand it. She went on to say it fosters creativity, the critical thinking skills, the collaboration part of it, and it challenged her to embrace the innovative teaching methods and adapt her instructional delivery. And then the program's emphasis on exploration and discovery, and I love this right here, has reignited her passion for teaching. And that comes straight from them. We didn't tell them what to say. We told them to be honest. And then the students. So we had to get student input as well, Dr. Yeager, because this is for the students. The students were like, it's an array of stuff. The teacher became a partner with them. We saw that in student statements, that they made it easier to understand. They didn't judge me. The teacher didn't judge me for my answers, and the teacher let us work together as teams in the classroom. One student had put down, I learned a lot from my classmate, which tells me the teacher is allowing that peer mentoring, peer tutoring going on in the classroom.
Right.
So it was positive from students as well. And of course, you're going to have those students. One student put, well, I'm still learning. Okay, well, that's not negative. Or, somebody was like, well, that means there's nothing from it. No, for a student to say I'm still learning, they could have said, this has done nothing, or I've learned nothing. They're still learning, which tells me there's engagement going on in the classroom. So all of the feedback has been vital to us for how we move forward with this partnership.
I will tell you that, the thing that I always struggle with as an administrator trying to create a system was jumping from scriptedness of what we can buy and purchase to the
Mhm.
actual classroom behavior of teachers
Yeah.
that actually gets at the students. And that is a huge gap in terms of how to get there. You know, we use words like relationships, as you mentioned, productive struggle, but in some sense, I don't think we've really scaffolded what relationship really is, or scaffolded what productive struggle could look like, because there is a variance among teacher to teacher to teacher. And so giving them these practices to be able to iterate within themselves. And I think that's what the teachers are doing when they join up to the fellowship. And this
Yeah.
is what, and I hope that your teachers are saying the similar things in that regard.
They are. It has been positive. I do have a few teachers who are leaving the district. One of them, their spouse got transferred, so they have to leave the Houston
Yeah,
area completely.
right.
And one is leaving the field, but the one who is leaving the district said, "Can you find out?" And she told me the district she's going to. I won't say it out here. If they have Fuse and how I can, stay in it because I don't want to get out of it. I said,
Yeah,
well, I'll see what I can do and figure out. But it was good to hear a teacher
yeah,
who's leaving saying they wanted to continue it instead of saying, oh, good, I don't have to do that anymore. I haven't
right.
heard that from any of them.
Yeah. And I think that this is great, Stephen. I didn't know any of this. It's
Yeah.
amazing. But certainly when we developed Fuse, we were thinking at all as former educators, how do I create the kind of thing I would want to go to
Yes.
rather than the kind of thing I would complain to all my colleagues about being forced to go to, right?
Yes.
And we've all been to professional training at whatever role. It was like, this is not a good use of my time. And you can always see the most competent teachers grading papers in the back if it's not a good use of time, right? And so we wanted something where people were like, no, I chose to do this, and it's how I want to use my time.
Yeah.
And I think that just at a high level, in general, as we're evaluating all the challenges we have, we want to be a proof point for the idea that if you engage teachers
Mm-hmm.
and help them engage students, which solves a problem teachers know that they have, right? We're not coming to teachers saying, here's the other thing you weren't thinking about. Now we're going to train you on how to fix this problem you don't necessarily care about. It's like, no, they know that disengagement's a problem, and it's really frustrating for them.
Yeah.
We want to engage them as humans and respected and with all the same values we want the teenagers to have.
Yeah.
And our hope is that if you do that, then what if it could change the field and how people go about trying to spread education and reform? So much of it comes from an incompetence model, a model that teachers will screw it up if you let them do it, right? And therefore we script and we control. And that is the same model a lot of teachers use with their students. They're like, I'm not going to do open-ended learning or have kids talk in small groups because it's going to be Lord of the Flies, right?
Yeah.
And I think we have, as a society, we've had the same kind of pejorative view about teachers. And we want to be a proof point that doesn't have to be the case, that there's another way to honor and value people. So I think the big takeaway for people watching is, regardless of your curiosity about Fuse for math, we hope people follow this as a movement. And we want to start a movement, actually. We want our Fuse fellows testifying to Congress and being on major boards, talking at AMATIC, professional conferences, and saying, we've had enough of the old way. It hasn't worked, and it feels terrible. So please, those of you in power, let's have a different way. And I think what your teachers are saying, but they're voting in a good way with their feet, that they wanna stay infused. I think that's important. We got to listen to that.
And society as a whole changes, and the way we learn changes, even for adults. So it reverberates down to students. And you said earlier you were more polite and professional, and we've all sat through trainings where the teachers sit in the back of the room and grade the papers because they're not engaged. With adults, some of us say, how many trainings have we been to? And we just want to sit in the back of the room and bang our head on the wall. We don't want that. Well, we don't want that in the classroom either. So in our end district, working with teachers, we don't want them being disengaged. It's the same thing in the classroom, and it's all in the delivery and the engagement and making them feel a part of the system.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Andrew. Sorry, I cut you off. So.
Who I'll just say that laugh line. There's one fellow who later identified to me. He said I'm autistic, so I just say things that are brutally honest. and he's a great guy. And he comes with me. He's like, this is the first training I've been to where I didn't think that could have been an email.
Yes.
So, all right, Andy.
Well, I want to say, guys, we probably have taken too much of your time already, and especially you, Stephen, because I know you got a lot of things going on, especially with the weekend of eclipse activities and so forth. And of course, all the guests who have joined us here today as well, too. Just for everyone, we will send out this slide as well as this webinar to everybody next week. So you'll have that. But I think, Stephen, I think it's important that we started off with a conversation. It wasn't like oh, by the way, get this and do this, but rather it was a very short sets of conversations that you and I've had. And for you to really see the merits of this, to have joined that process. And I think it's going to take some of those conversations. Yeah. And so we certainly will ask for anyone listening to this and watching this that, we need about 37 minutes of your time to have a conversation, to discuss and share what this is and how this could be extremely useful, that really gets to what teachers really want. And so I hope that will be the message there. Stephen, I just really appreciate it. Thanks for your friendship.
Absolutely.
Can't wait to come out and see you in your new office and check that out.
Perfect.
And go to the diner down the road, by the way. And David, thanks again. Of course, every time I listen to your talk, I'm always walking away with new ideas and new thoughts. And so it really is good in that regard. I appreciate that quite a bit. Well, thanks to both of you guys for joining in our webinar. Once again, thanks to those who are on it as well, too. We really do appreciate it. And reach us out to us and let us know how we can go ahead and help you. We have all of our information that's been sent to you as well. So just email us and we'll talk with you soon.
And I just think, maybe Stephen, you'd agree. I think if you're curious at all, we'd love to talk to you, because we're as interested as we are in making fuse available. We're even more interested in just changing the culture around young people and having a movement. And so we would love any co-conspirators in building this better future for young people.
Yeah, don't hesitate at all, really. And I'm not just saying it. I'm not getting any, they're not paying me to say this. I'm just telling you because it's truth. From a former principal, teacher, and now superintendent perspective, it really is changing the way instruction is happening in the classroom.
Right. That's good. All right.
All right. Well, thank you all so much.
Yeah, you guys take care. Have a great weekend. All right.